ready.
Okay.
Let me...
Strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a bumpy ride.
Here we go. We're getting ready.
Feel free to ask questions in the chat room as we go along, of course.
We're getting ready to give...
Type them in caps so we can see them.
Joel Gilbert a call, the director of the new DVD, Paul McCartney Really Is Dead, The Last Testament of George Harrison. So without further ado, let's go.
Hello?
Hi, is this Joel?
Yes.
Well, let me do the official introductions. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of a great new DVD that is pending release. It's going to be coming out very soon here. Paul McCartney Really Is Dead, The Last Testament of George Harrison. We are very happy to welcome the director to the show, Mr. Joel Gilbert. You're on the air live with Terry and Tiffany. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
I wanted to let you know, Joel, this is Terry Defoe, that I thought it was a great DVD, very interesting. Whether you believe it or not, something that every Beatles fan should have, because it actually has a lot of archival footage in it too, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of historic footage in the film, and it recounts the history of the Beatles in a never-before-told chronology that ties all of the clues that you've probably heard about here and there about the Paul is Dead mystery. It ties them together in a way that makes them much more understandable and much more real. And the narrator of the film is the voice of George Harrison. If you check out the website, you can see the trailer and more of the explanation and some of the photos. It's at paulreallyisdead.com. And we received a couple of mini cassette tapes, those little cassette tapes that you remember we used to put in our telephone answering machines.
Mm-hmm.
We received those in our offices in Los Angeles anonymously from England in 2005, and it was a voice that sounded just like George Harrison giving a confessional about the entire Paul is Dead mystery from the inside, someone that was in the Beatles. So we tried to authenticate the voice and kind of proved inconclusive. So we decided to go ahead and make a film about it and let everyone else decide for themselves. And really, it is a very scary thriller once you see the movie and you tie all the clues together.
I just wanted to find out a little bit about you. Now, you work for Highway 61 Productions. At least you produce this DVD there. Tell me a little bit about the company and a little bit about your background, what you do. I know you're a Bob Dylan fan. I also heard you were also a Bob Dylan impersonator.
Okay, well, Highway 61 Entertainment is my company, which I founded back in 2001 when I produced my first film documentary on Bob Dylan. It was called Bob Dylan World Tour in 1966, The Home Movies, and that was with some archival footage made by Mickey Jones, Bob Dylan's drummer in the band, in 1966 on Dylan's first electric tour. So this was the first Dylan documentary, and then several others followed. And I've always been the director, producer, and interviewed people in the films. And I also did 2 documentaries on the Middle East, the history of Islam. The last one that came out a few months ago was called Atomic Jihad, Ahmadinejad's Coming War, and Obama's Politics of Defeat. And you can check that one out at atomicjihad.com. And that film won the Hudson Institute Film Festival, and it was also screened at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington back in February. So this is my latest film coming out September 1st on DVD. And so what I've been doing for some years is producing these films.
I want to know, did you, in doing your Dylan films, did you ever have a chance to actually interview Dylan? You'll see what I'm getting at in a minute.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned I have a Bob Dylan tribute band, which is kind of my professional hobby. It's a look-alike, sound-alike recreation of Bob Dylan's live music. And actually, over time, what's happened is I've interviewed people for the Bob Dylan documentaries. I've done 4 of them. And every time I interview people for the documentaries, I always say, hey, how would you like to come down and play with my band at the House of Blues tomorrow night or something like that? And they say, yeah, man, I'll come. So I've actually accumulated 4 full-time band members that used to be in Bob Dylan's band.
Cool.
So it's myself and 4 original band members. So what I say to the audience is, Bob Dylan's band has the original Bob Dylan, but I've got the original band tonight. And,
I like that. I like that.
It goes over really well. So I'm hoping not to have any more Dylan band members, because if I do, it'll be Bob Dylan replacing me. and I won't be in the band anymore.
Yeah, and then you might have.
Asked me, go ahead.
I was going to say you might have somebody then come on stage naked like Bob did one night.
Well, I hope not. But what did you ask me about the who I've interviewed with the?
Well, basically,
repeat the question.
Right. Basically, what I was getting at, if you've known Bob Dylan and or interviewed him, have you spoken to Bob at all about this Paul McCartney thing?
No, I've never interviewed Dylan personally. He's known to be someone who's very reclusive, of course. Some of his best friends I've interviewed, and even in my band are some of the people that are closer to him, and he talks to them about once a year or something like that. He rarely sees them or talks to them. We know Dylan is known to give very few interviews. He's on tour all the time, half the year at least,
right.
And is not a very person that's easy to talk to. So we haven't asked him about the Dylan documentaries, let alone the Paul McCartney one.
Right. Well,
there is a special feature at the end in this Beatles film. There's a special feature that's in addition. It's called Bob Dylan Meets the Beatles. And that's an interview I did with a reporter named Al Aronowitz, who actually introduced Dylan to the Beatles the first time. And he recounts the story of how Bob Dylan taught the Beatles, wanted them to try to smoke marijuana, and the Beatles tried to get Dylan to take pills. Because at that time, all of Britain, all the youth there were pill heads. They took pills.
Right.
Whereas in America, pills were rejected as something chemical and unnatural. And marijuana was seen as something natural, like the hippie culture. It was from the earth. So, of course, Dylan won that argument, and the Beatles started smoking pot, and they never stopped.
I know. I saw it on the DVD. It was very enjoyable. You're a very good interviewer.
Thanks. I pride myself on knowing the material before I ask the question. And that's one reason I think that we were lucky to be the recipient of these anonymous tapes, because I'm known for my thoroughness and good questions and honesty when it comes to rock and roll history.
Well, let me ask you just an interesting question here, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything.
I hope it's interesting.
Well,
you're certainly setting it up.
What I'm trying to get at is knowing that you put out these Dylan documentaries, and they were very well acclaimed, and you are known as a great Dylan biographer. In knowing that you say you never really got the tapes of George Harrison authenticated, why would you put your reputation out on a limb to do something that could possibly make people look at you in a light to where maybe if you put out future projects, they wouldn't look at you as possibly being so legitimate?
Okay, well, first of all, we took the tapes to a couple of forensic labs, and because of a couple of reasons. Number one, we did not know the source of the tape, so that's one reason they can't be authenticated 100%. Number two, if you listen to the voice on the tapes, it does sound very similar to the George Harrison voice from the 90s. If you listen to some interviews with him, even on YouTube, has a little deeper voice, talks a little slower. A lot of people are familiar with the early 60s voice with a little thicker Liverpool accent and a little different. But without also a live source of a living George Harrison to compare them to, they could not be 100% authenticated. We feel that there's a high likelihood it could be George Harrison, and in the film and in the literature we do say that we don't know for sure. You've got to listen and decide for yourself. Listen to how the clues come together if you think this is the voice of George Harrison. So it's kind of like a mystery, and it's fun to listen to, and everyone can decide for themselves. So I don't think it's an issue of, I'm not saying for sure this is George Harrison. I'm saying you should listen to it. But the story, whether it's George Harrison or not, the story is so compelling. You'll hear so many new clues you haven't heard before, and just to have the clues tied together, I think makes the film a lot of fun. And it's really like watching a thriller. Somebody wrote me an email that saw it. He said, "Do not watch this chilling, disturbing documentary late at night, or you may find yourself screaming through the house in a state of panic. It is that scary."
Right. Well,
so I think the film is enjoyable no matter what.
Absolutely. I just kind of wanted to ask one question that we've gotten from a lot of our audience that heard about you coming on tonight, and that is kind of going back to the tapes. I know we've already talked about how you had tried to get them, audio authenticated as far as audio goes. Was there ever any kind of an attempt or research into trying to track down the package through the mail system and find out where it came from? Because, of course, Harrison died in 2001, so a lot of fans would beg the question of, A, why did it take so long to get sent to a media outlet, and B, why Highway 61? Why not send them to the BBC or somebody
Right.
like that?
Okay, well, the chronology of it, I can tell you, is Harrison, these tapes were purported to have been recorded on December 31st, 1999, which was the night after George Harrison was attacked in his home, if everyone remembers that incident, and he almost died. He was stabbed by by a deranged fan. So he allegedly recorded these tapes the next night as a kind of a confessional or wanting to make sure he got this story down. Then he died the next year later, not from the attack, but from cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And then we received these tapes in 2005. There was no return address. It was impossible to trace this kind of thing. The reason we didn't go knocking on the door of George Harrison's people or his estate was because we thought, well, maybe this came from somebody in the Harrison camp or a relative or someone that worked for him that felt that they wanted this to get out. Secondly, I think the reason it went out of Britain is because if it did go to the BBC or some media outlet in Britain, if it's real, it might have been much easier for Harrison's estate or widow or somebody that did not want the tapes to be heard, or that wanted to find whoever did it, would be easier to do that if it was in England. I have a reputation, as gentleman alluded to, for very authentic and real and honest examinations of history of the Dylan material. So that's why I think we got it, and this kind of all makes sense in that context, that whoever did get the tapes wanted to get them out of Britain so they could see the light of day.
So,
it could have been someone that Harrison might have told,
Right.
in 5 years' time after my death, send these to somebody in America, and I'd like someone to put this out there, but don't, make sure you get it out of Britain.
So in knowing that you do have the reputation you have, which you do, and like I said, it's well produced. It's no cheap DVD, folks. I mean, the production value on this is totally excellent. You guys at Highway 61 definitely know what you're doing. But, I see a lot of money tied up in this DVD, knowing it had to cost a few bucks to produce. I mean, I know a lot of filmmakers, amateur and professional, and this is no little amateur project. And knowing what it probably cost to put this together, you really decided to put this out on just your belief or a hunch it's authentic? I mean, to take such a chance on putting something out, knowing it had to cost what it cost to put it together, to not be absolutely sure, would you say, for instance, if somebody just sent you a tape of some other dead celebrity like Elvis Presley or whatever, you would just put it out because you thought it sounded like him?
Well, the story that was told on the tapes was so authentic, and some of the clues that were cited by the George Harrison voice were things that I never heard of, and that made a lot of sense that no one's ever heard of. So there was a ton of material and interesting facts that were new to me, that we researched and found them to be true. So there was enough interesting material that we felt, based on the sound of the voice and the facts and the chronology and everything that was put together, that we felt there's a highly probable chance that it's a true story. So yes, it is worth it to get the story out there, because I do feel that someone entrusted me with the job to tell the story. Because Harrison is not alive and because it was sent anonymously, there's no way to 100% authenticate it. So that's why I want everyone to listen and check it out for themselves. And it's it's at paulreallyisdead.com. You can order a copy, see the trailer, and it's coming out on September 1st.
Well, let me ask you, I don't know, obviously the DVDs, as you mentioned just now, is going to be released on September 1st, so maybe you haven't gotten an opportunity to hear a lot back from fans, but we have a chat room going on right now, and one of the questions that they brought up is, A, have you received any hassle from EMI or McCartney's family on all of this, or have you received any backlash from Beatles fans? Because I know that they're very sensitive and devoted when it comes to this subject.
And one more thing, do you worry about lawsuits?
Oh boy, these are three interesting questions.
We're trying.
Okay. First of all, Beatles fans in general enjoy and are familiar with the Paul McCartney Really Is Dead urban legend, and it's kind of a fun thing that people know about certain clues. They discover a clue, or they hear about a clue, or I think that's a clue, or some clues you can't avoid. There's things you can hear very clearly in the lyrics, and the songs played backwards. Paul is dead, man, miss him, or I buried Paul. There's so many things that are very obvious that kind of creep people out. So I think there's a great curiosity to finally have a film that puts the whole story together in a way that they can understand it. I'll give you one quick example is in the film, of course, everybody knows the Sgt. Pepper's and Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover is in the Paul is Dead legend is known to be a funeral scene for Paul McCartney. It's all the people that would have been at Paul's funeral standing in front of a freshly dug piece of earth with a drumhead gravestone and Paul McCartney's bass there, and you see the words, "Here lies Paul." Now, Harrison alleges in the voice and in my film that MI5, which is British intelligence, is the force that forced them to cover up the death of McCartney because Her Majesty's government was afraid that Beatles fans would commit suicide en masse worldwide because of all the Beatlemania. So MI5 realized that they were trying to send clues to their fans, and they were threatened by MI5. So the very next album, of course, was the White Album that was completely blank so that they would appease MI5 and have no clues on it. Then they went back to putting more clues in the album cover and in the lyrics. So if people listen to this, watch this DVD, they can see all the clues tied together in a chronology that they've never known about. So the people that have seen the film have been very enthusiastic. We do have some reviews on the website, some from media outlets like the Boston Herald or World Magazine, and some from individuals that have seen it. People are very passionate about Paul McCartney and the Beatles and George Harrison, and you can certainly have some people that would rather not think about it or don't want to think that McCartney might have been replaced. So it has, and it certainly, I think, will continue to get very passionate responses from people.
Well, one thing about it, you're in a great position. I'm sure you are a Beatles fan, but whether it's true or not, you're bound to make $1 million on this thing. It's going to create. It's kind of like a train wreck. You can't look away. I say that in a good way because, like I said, I really did enjoy it. It was very well produced. The thing that I thought was somewhat strange, or shall I say humorous, is the man that was the head of this British intelligence agency. His name is Maxwell, as in Maxwell's Silver Hammer. And the other player in the story is Rita, as in lovely Rita Metermaid. Isn't that kind of strange? They're characters from Beatles songs.
Well, that's the whole thing. If you look at the film and if you know the Paul is Dead mystery, the theory goes, and it starts in this film, that McCartney died in a car accident in 1966. So immediately we see the Beatles lyrics after that come out with, you died in a car crash. You stopped for Rita and picked her up. A pool of tears. Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Everything's about death and dying and crying and missing. So those lyrics, both the lyrics, the songs played backwards, there's similar messages, and on the album covers and in the graphics you can see all these clues that the Beatles were trying to signal their fans that McCartney had died, and they were being forced to cover it up by Maxwell, who was the character that worked for MI5, that was kind of their handler, that forced them to do this act of getting an imposter to replace McCartney, and then forcing them to cover it up. So they were always under the thumb of Maxwell.
One question I have, and I don't even know if you would be able to shed any light on it, but in the Paul is Dead kind of myth, as you alluded to earlier, the imposter that became known as Fall, which is fake Paul, was a man by the name of William Campbell. Now, if he completely dropped everything in his life to essentially become the new Paul McCartney, was there not ever any traces of his disappearance? Did his friends and family ever say anything? I mean, what about that missing person, that vessel that was William Campbell, that had to basically cease to exist to become the new Paul McCartney?
Yeah, I don't think it's really been researched what happened to the William Campbell person. We know for sure that there was a Paul McCartney lookalike contest that was held by Dick Clark's American Bandstand in the late 1966. We know that they never announced a winner, and according to Harrison, there was a winner, and it was William Campbell, who was very enthusiastic with the idea of actually becoming Paul McCartney. And at that time, the Beatles announced that they would no longer tour and only record in the studio, and that's what gave them some time and cover to integrate the imposter into the band. But no research, as far as I know, has ever been done to go find William Campbell, who's supposedly Canadian, to find out what his family thought happened to him.
Right. You know, a lot of people wonder about the ladies in McCartney's life, but that's even explained in the DVD, in the fact that according to the George Harrison, or the person sounds like George Harrison or really is George Harrison, one way or the other, all according to how you look at it.
Yeah, I can explain the two women for you real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll give you the two tidbits. According to Harrison on the tapes and in the film, the Beatles were terrified of Linda Eastman, who was a photographer, because she photographed the Beatles from the early days, from 62, 63, and she was very familiar with the Beatles and had lots of photos of them, and also had a crush on Paul McCartney. So they were terrified of her and tried to stay away from her, because they thought, because she was a photographer, that if she started photographing the fake Paul, that she would realize that it wasn't the same person. Mm-hmm. So according to Harrison in my film, Linda Eastman confronted Paul McCartney in '69 after the Paul is Dead mystery went public. You know, it did go public worldwide, where people started writing about all the lyrics and the album cover clues that Paul McCartney might really be dead. After that went worldwide and McCartney, or the fake McCartney, came out and they denied it, that's when Linda Eastman confronted Paul McCartney and said that she knew that he wasn't the same Paul McCartney, and she had photographic evidence of it, and she demanded that he marry her and put her in his next band in exchange for her silence. So according to Harrison, that's why he married her very suddenly, you know, only with 1 week's notice. Now later on, when McCartney is in divorce proceedings with Heather Mills a few years ago, you see her on British television saying things like, I have a box of evidence. The truth will come out. If anything happens to me, someone's going to send out the truth and people will find out. She doesn't say what it is, but it's very strange that she's talking that way. And so she may have been privy to this as well.
What I was getting at, though, is in the documentary, George Harrison says that Rita, who was the one that
we don't want to give away everything. I've given a few pieces of information about the two women in his life. Let's not give away all the details.
Yeah, but it's taken away.
We want people to see the film.
It's taken away a very important question I wanted to ask, though.
I know, but I mean, how much? We don't want to give away all the good, fun clues. I've given enough about the two women. That's enough.
Well, one other question I had then is in regards to these tapes. Now, when anybody is talking, talking on air, talking on a recording, talking on a tape, just the natural flow of your words and the way that you talk is not always necessarily in complete sentences and dictated absolutely correctly. The narration that is on the DVD by the voice that sounds like George Harrison sounds almost like it's completely scripted. It's so clean and polished, and it also has almost a studio quality to the sound, not really sounding like a handheld tape recorder. Did you guys ever explore the idea that maybe that this was something that was professionally produced and sent to you guys as a joke, or to scam you guys, because it sounds so polished?
Or maybe there was digital enhancement they did at the studio.
Yeah. Let me explain that. When we got the tapes had a lot of rough stuff on them. There were coughs, there was fidgeting sounds, there was some voices in the background, there were gaps. It was still chronologically, we didn't change it, but there were rougher, and we made a cut with showing all the film footage and all the clues that he was talking about with just the voice. And it just was kind of dragged and kind of felt boring. So we said, let's put some music to it, and we composed with my band and some of the people in the Bob Dylan band, made Beatlesque music. So it sounds just like Beatles music in the background. So once we put some music to it, it really made the film move and feel fun and move well. But then you really couldn't hear the clicks and the coughs and all these things. Or you'd hear it with the music and it would sound strange. So we did clean up some of the spaces and the coughs and the fidgeting things, which you really couldn't hear with the music anyway. Mm-hmm. And that's why it sounds a lot smoother than when we first got it. And I think it's more enjoyable to listen with music and the whole story being told without the raw tape. And it had a hissing sound on it as well, which we cleaned up. And it was just kind of annoying to listen to after a while. So that's why we put the music with it.
Yeah, it definitely made it flow. I could have been real boring just to hear a conversation.
Yeah, there was like a hiss, like a low hiss from the type of tape it is. But we filtered that out, and it didn't sound good with the music, so we filtered it out.
I guess even in the lyrics of Yellow Submarine there are clues too, right, as far as Paul being buried?
Well, sure. The Yellow Submarine, sky of blue, sea of green in our yellow submarine. So Harrison says that Yellow Submarine was a metaphor for a coffin, a pine casket, and sky of blue, sea of green. The sky, when you're in the graveyard, the sea of green is you're under the earth, underneath the green grass, sky of blue, sea of green in your yellow submarine in your casket. So that almost every song and every album really does have it alludes to McCartney's death. There are definitely hundreds of clues about McCartney being dead. It's not possible. The denials of the Beatles over the years that it was just a big coincidence is very much not credible. Either the Beatles were all in on a massive inside joke to put clues that McCartney died all over their albums and in the lyrics and backwards, or he really is dead.
Well, see, that was another thing that bothered me, because George said in the narration that they had wrote that line about sky of blue and sea of green to cover up the fact that to kind of illustrate the fact that Paul was dead. On Cult Radio here, we recently had Donovan, and Donovan, of course, is a very close friend of the Beatles, and he was with them when they wrote that song, and they were lacking a phrase there. It was kind of a hole in the song, and Donovan actually wrote that line for them.
Well, I've interviewed a lot of people, for instance, that wrote a couple of lines of Like a Rolling Stone, Just about everybody you meet that knows somebody will claim that they contributed, and if you don't take it all with a grain of salt, Bob Dylan didn't write any songs, and the Beatles had all their songs written by their friends.
Well, one question that the chat room that a lot of the listeners are asking, and I guess there's no nice way to ask this, so I'll just ask it. They're wanting to know if you believe that this is true, or from a personal standpoint. I mean, I know obviously you're the director of the DVD, and whether it's true or not, it's a great story and a great DVD. But personally, do you believe that Paul McCartney is dead?
I believe that Paul McCartney is dead. I think it's possible. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know for sure. I mean, I got an email from somebody that saw the film, and she said, I believe that McCartney was injured very badly in the accident and has been stayed in the Beatles from behind the scenes. Yes, they had an imposter, but McCartney is actually still alive. So there's theory upon theory, and I think that this film presents a very plausible theory that has never been taken this far in depth, never been tied together, and never been told from a first-person point of view, that presents a theory that is just as plausible or more plausible than the Beatles, surviving Beatles, saying that all these hundreds of clues are just coincidence. I think this is more plausible.
What do most of the media think? I was wondering, are most of them kind of like us, to where we're throwing some hard questions at you, or you get some that actually straight out believe it?
Well, it's been a variety. I mean, I was interviewed by Mancow out of Chicago, and he has a sidekick, and every time Mancow asked me a question, the sidekick jumped in and threw out 10 clues that I never heard of. I said, oh, well, that's a good one. But it wasn't cited by Harrison, so I didn't use it. But so some of them find it very fascinating. Some of them are sure that McCartney is dead, and they cite the fact that Paul McCartney's output of of songs and material and personality became so different after the Beatles that he must be an imposter. And I've had some people be very skeptical. So it's probably they're just probably like any other Beatles fans. Either they find it fascinating and want to learn more, or they like to be skeptical, or they just enjoy a very interesting phenomenon. There's no other artist that you can find a couple of hundred clues that one of the band members is dead.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you this. It kind of goes along in with what you just said, and this question, again, was submitted by somebody that works with our station, is actually kind of a rock historian in his own right and does a segment for us. So it's a little long, but this is kind of a fun question. So let me ask you. He states... since much of the Paul is Dead legend rests on an interpretation of Beatle lyrics and album covers and the fact that the group gave up touring after 1966, have you ever, as a Bob Dylan tribute artist, explored the possibility of Bob Dylan being replaced, since Dylan was involved in a mysterious accident on his Triumph motorcycle in July of '66 and immediately went into seclusion with the exception of a sporadic public appearance without touring again for the next 8 years? And when he did reemerge in '67, he came back with a different singing style and a radically different style of songwriting. I guess apparently self-proclaimed Dylanologist A.J. Weberman has claimed that if you play the song New Morning backwards, Dylan says, "Don't expose me." Could these all be clues, just like with the Beatles thing, that Dylan really is dead? Can you comment on that?
Could you repeat that question? Okay, look. First, I'll tell you a couple things. First of all, I can tell you very conclusively and firmly that Bob Dylan did not have a motorcycle accident at the end of, in '66 in Woodstock. The motorcycle accident was a cover for what I've found out from my sources was putting him into drug rehab. Mm-hmm. He actually was on his motorcycle and skidded on some gravel coming out of a driveway of Albert Grossman's house, cut up his knee a little bit, went to the doctor to put some iodine on his knee, and the doctor said, "Your knee is fine, but you don't look so good." So he went into a drug rehab for, a few weeks. I've talked to people, interviewed people that saw him the next day after this accident, and he was fine. He was not badly injured with a neck or whatever he claimed to be. So in terms of not being exposed, that's what Weberman is referring to, is that Dylan made up this lie or this charade to drop out of touring because of the drug situation that he needed to rehab from, but didn't want to announce that was his private business, that was his problem. So there is no body of hundreds of clues of Dylan being replaced or anything like that. I know Dylan's history during that period quite well, and there's no question that the Bob Dylan of that time, though he has reinvented himself 30 times over and gone through about 30 personality and musical changes, it's still the same DNA.
Right, right. Is it possible that maybe the Beatles were just having a big laugh at everyone's expense, and maybe they were just... I mean, Paul publicly admitted to taking LSD, or fall, depending on what you believe, publicly admitted to LSD. Is there any chance that maybe they were just, dare I say, high and having a laugh at the fans' expense?
Well, if so, they did that over 5 or 6 years, because there's so many clues. I mean, there's no way to explain. You can hear George Harrison's voice being played forward, not even backwards masking, just saying, "I buried Paul, oh, untimely death." There's no explanation for these guys over 5 years putting all these clues and saying that McCartney was dead, he was a corpse, he was, 6 feet under, on and on and on. So, like I said, either it was a massive ongoing inside joke, and they even wrote about it in songs that were very obvious, like Lennon wrote, "Here's another clue for you all, the walrus was Paul." So they were into and interested in this phenomena, whether they did it intentionally as a joke or because there was something to it, is what everyone's been trying to find out all these years.
Right, right. Well, we want to thank you so much, Joel, for being on the air with us. It's been a very interesting interview. And again, we encourage all of our listeners, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, you want to pick up this DVD and check it out. It's masterfully produced, and it really just ties everything together for you. So you definitely want to check it out. It's Paul McCartney Really Is Dead, The Last Testament of George Harrison. It's coming out in the U.S. on September 1st, and then shortly thereafter it's going to be released internationally, correct?
Correct. I want to also point out it's going to be on a lot of cable networks, pay-per-view, video on demand, also on September 1st, coming out on Comcast, Time Warner, all the big cable stations and networks. You can also pre-order at paulreallyisdead.com. Got the trailer there as well. And we think everyone should check it out. We love the film and think it really has some historic significance.
Definitely recommend it. I can't say I believe it, but I recommend it. I did enjoy it. I did. I really did. I just want you to know that.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much. You have a nice night, Joel.
All right.
Bye-bye.